Alright, hey there hunters, Lord here. Welcome back to another Monster Hunter Wilds video. I wanted to go ahead and show you guys the settings that I've been running on the new Monster Hunter Wilds benchmarking tool for PC. These are the settings that I've found that give me the crispest image while still getting extremely good frames per second. I'll be sure to share with you guys at the end of the video all the different tests I've done. I've done like 11 or 12 at this point on various settings with different monitors, different resolutions, different DLSS, whether that's on, off, set to performance, set to balance, set to quality. I'll go over all of that at the end of the video, but for those of you who just want to know the best settings, this is what I've been running. So in the options in my display, I am running a 1440p monitor, but I decided to run it at 1080p because my graphics card just likes 1080p better. I haven't really noticed any difference in how the image quality looks, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. I've seen a lot of discourse on the internet saying, hey, I got a 4K monitor, I play at 1440p, I don't notice a difference, etc., etc. So I gave that a try. It gave me better performance overall, and really, I don't notice much of a difference. As you can see here on the right, these are my specs for the current PC that I am using. So again, your mileage may vary if you've got, a 3050, or if you're running a 4090, you might be able to pull this way up high compared to what I have. But this is what I'm running. So I've got my graphics set to custom, do not adjust separately. I'm running DLSS currently with a no frame gen, and on the quality setting, this I noticed has actually given me a better resolution than native 1080p while giving me a large uptick in frames per second. Ray tracing is off. I never run ray tracing. I have a ray tracing card, but I just don't see the point. Really, I'm here to fight monsters, not look at lumens and rays and such things. Texture quality is still on high. Turned my filtering quality to medium just to test it out. Felt like it was a little bit better. Mesh quality, fur quality high. Sky cloud quality, again, I'm not really spending a lot of time looking at this. I'm going to be fighting monsters. I'm going to be looking at them, not the sky. Turn this to medium. Grass and tree quality is on high. Sway is enabled. Wind simulation quality, I left this on high because during the benchmark, you get to see a little bit of a ripple through the grass of the wind, and I just thought it looked nicer on high. The surface quality is still on high. The sand and snow quality is still on high. For the most part, I left everything on high, which is what it defaulted to. Water effects enabled. Render distance, I changed this from high up to highest and did not notice a huge hit, so I went ahead and left it. Shadow quality, I turned on to medium. I feel like there's not really much difference here. And again, I'm going to be looking at the monsters, not the shadows. So this tiny little bit of extra sharpness in the shadows didn't seem to make a big difference to me. And it is a big user of GPU and my VRAM, so I just turned it down to medium. The distance shadow quality, again, turned to low. Same reasons as you've heard me say before. Shadow distance, medium. You can set it up kind of however you want. I'm sure if I switched this to far, it would not make much of a difference, but I left it on medium. The ambient light quality, left it on high. Contact shadows enabled. I always turn off ambient occlusion. I feel like this eats up a decent amount of my GPU, and really I don't pay enough attention to these things for it to matter, so I went ahead and turned that off. And then on the last page, I turned pretty much everything off except the screen space reflection. Bloom, no point in having it. Motion blur, I don't feel like I'm ever going fast enough to notice motion blur anyway. The vignette effect, I just don't like having that darkness around the corner of my screen, so I turned that off. The quadruple S scattering, again, I feel like I'm not noticing much there. If anything, it looks slightly sharper with it off, to me personally. Depth of field, I always turn off. I think it's kind of a pointless setting. I've turned this off in every Monster Hunter game I've had on the PC and have not noticed any issues. Volumetric fog will actually eat up a lot of your performance. This was a big thing that we turned off in Monster Hunter World. So here in Wilds, I've turned it to low. And then the variable rate shading, I actually have off. You could definitely turn it to performance if you needed to squeeze out a few extra frames. All right, so this is the first test that I pulled up. I did this while recording yesterday's video where I went over the benchmark and how to use it. This was with no DLSS, or this was with DLSS on, apologies. So I had an issue when I first downloaded the game, or the benchmark tool, rather, of where whenever I tried to turn DLSS off, it would crash. So this first test is DLSS on while I was recording audio on Audacity and OBS for the video recording. So I had two different recording softwares going on my other two monitors while my main monitor was running the benchmark test. Then I went ahead and did the same exact settings, but without recording anything, and you can see my FPS jumped by 9, my score jumped by a little over 3,000. The next test, I turned off DLSS, also not recording, and you can see we went from 82 to about 77. And so the DLSS jump was only about 5 frames, which is not a ton at that point, so I continued testing. I went ahead and did a flash update on my BIOS, and it jumped by another about 2.7 frames per second here. So if you are not in your most updated BIOS, you want to squeeze out a few extra frames, that could be a good way of doing it. The fifth test, I turned on DLSS and frame generation. Again, all at the same settings, jumped from about 80 to about 130. So the frame generation did make a pretty big difference there. And if we're playing at a base of 80 frames, we're not going to notice much input delay or lag or missing inputs there anyway. Then the sixth test was the same as this test, but with everything on high settings instead of medium, and that dropped us by about 7 frames. But again, is very comparable to kind of that range where you'd be comfortable at. You won't notice any missed inputs if you did turn on frame gen. Then on test 7, I went into my NVIDIA control panel and turned on the newest DLSS and frame generation settings for the DLSS 4 and tested it out with frame generation and DLSS on. And as you can see, we went from 130 up to 139, so about a 9 FPS increase. So making sure that you turn on the newest DLSS if you're using an NVIDIA GPU is going to be a great way to squeeze some extra frames out. The next test, I turned everything to medium, same as this test. I just turned off DLSS and frame gen. Again, we're right around 79, so not too far off from what we were seeing here anyway. Again, that's not going to make too much of a difference with the DLSS off anyway. The ninth test, I went back to my 1440p monitor and I just changed the resolution to 1080p. Again, 77 FPS, totally fine, super playable. It's about what we've been seeing anyway. The 10th test, I went ahead and turned on frame generation and I set the DLSS to quality. This actually gave me, like I said earlier, a better image than having the native 1080p resolution. It looked sharper, it looked crisper, it flowed a lot better. There was a lot less breakups in between those frames. So again, setting the DLSS to quality, if you can afford it, is going to give you some pretty good frames here. And then the final test that I did, the 11th test, I ran the exact same stuff, but turned off frame gen, and it's almost 87 frames per second, which is super playable today. I know it's not the best, but again, I don't have the most bulky rig anyway. So this is going to be more than enough for me personally. And this benchmark here is what the settings I showed you were scored in the benchmark. So if you want something similar to this, if you got a similar rig to me, looking at those settings and trying to emulate them will get you pretty solid results. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Be sure to subscribe for more Monster Hunter Wilds content. I'll catch you all in the next one. I wish you all a good day and happy hunting.